Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei fall in love with Leiko part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video and also share this video with your friends. I have created my other videos playlist, there you can watch my all videos easily, check out as well. Let's start this video. It was a quiet blissful night within the city of Tokyo. The citizens were chatting constantly with each other, conversing about their earlier activities. Within the penthouse apartment of Issei Hyoudou, the former and his wife were sleeping contentedly in their bed. His wife, a pale beauty with silky long black hair and dark grey eyes, held onto him in her arms, her grip in a possessive stance. Issei's soft breathing sensed with his wife's sleeping sighs. Beep beep. Ophis the Ouroboros dragon's eyes shot open at the random noise and she turned her head to the side, spotting her mate's cell phone on the nightstand. Gazing at the device momentarily, Ophis shrugged and held onto Issei tighter, attempting to fall asleep once more. Beep beep. The infinite dragon god narrowed her eyes and sent a childish glare towards the vibrating cell phone, seconds after decimating the damn device for ruining her sleep. With a faint huff, Ophis reluctantly removed her arms around Issei and sat up, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. Beep beep. Ophis snatched the cell phone off the nightstand and placed the phone on her ear, expecting it to be either Genshiro Saji or someone else who dared to interrupt her slumber. What? She flatly greeted the caller. Ophis. The Ouroboros dragon's annoyed expression lifted up just slightly at the sound of the curious voice. Cousin Leiko? Why is she calling at this time? This is the time in which I spoon feed my sleeping mate with absolutely no interruptions. Cousin Leiko. She began as a form of greeting, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I am fine. What is your reason for calling here? The dragon assumed it made no sense to beat around the bush, even if the person calling was her mate's cousin. If it had been anyone else, she would have hanged up the moment she heard his or her voice. Ise-itoko and I are supposed to go to a midnight movie tonight. I was just calling to remind him so he wouldn't forget. Ophis removed the phone away from her ear and looked at the time. 10:45 p.m. I see Cousin Leiko's decision to call at a much earlier time. I care not for what the movie is. However, I must know how long the movie is going to be. Oh, it's only 84 minutes, Ophis. It really shouldn't be that long. An hour and 24 minutes. If the movie is this long, it is not that important enough for my mate to spend that much time away from me spoon feeding him. Well, I wait. What did you just say? Spooning. Ophis repeated, her monotone showing no embarrassment, I am spooning my mate. It is an act of affection in particular that I enjoy, Cousin Leiko. If the two women were in the same room together, the Ouroboros dragon would have noticed a crimson blush present on Leiko's cheeks. Ophis could practically hear Leiko's heart beating from the phone. Aye. Ophis tilted her head as she waited for Leiko to stop in her stuttering. The dragon was always blunt in her words, so she was a little confused by Leiko's reaction. As soon as Leiko fell silent, Ophis took the initiative. When the movie is over, you will bring my Issei back immediately. Huh? Why are you confused? Do you intend to not bring Issei back to me? And no, of course not. I was just going to suggest that you come with us too. I can get an extra ticket for you. I have no interest in watching a movie, Cousin Leiko. You may take my mate to this midnight movie. But you will also bring him back as soon as the movie is over. Is that understood? Sure. Are you sure you don't want to come with us? I am sure. My mate will arrive at your location shortly. Ophis replied before ending their discussion. Placing the cell phone on the nightstand, Ophis adopted an annoyed expression, which slowly softened as she sent her gaze towards her sleeping mate. She then checked the time on the cell phone again, finding that it was now 10:50. Stupid Cousin Leiko, the Ouroboros dragon muttered in annoyance with a cute pout, interrupting my spooning with my precious Issei. Outside of the cinema. After making sure to placate his wife by promising to bring some sweets when he got home, Issei set out to find the cinema where the midnight movie would take place. The solar god was dressed in a white button shirt which was covered by a black jean jacket, blue jeans, and black boots. Trying to sense his cousin's energy signature within the large crowd of people outside, Issei looked around calmly. He lifted his wrist to his face, peering at his watch. 11:25. I've still got enough time. I just need to find Leiko-san. Ise-itoko? Over here. Issei reacted to the sound of the voice by looking around, only to widen his eyes in confusion. A young woman was waving to him, making it clear that she was the one who called him. Issei blinked several times as he looked at the woman. He was sure it was Leiko. It was just that the elder Hyoudou looked a little different from the last time he had seen her. And it wasn't even that long ago. The woman waving to him retained the same brown hair and forest green eyes. Wait. Forest green eyes? Leiko-san? Is that you? The forest green eyes were definitely unfamiliar. The style of her brown hair was far different than Issei had ever seen it. It was no longer long and straight, but short, frizzy, and shoulder length. Leiko's attire consisted of a black top, blue jeans, and light brown shoes. Issei blinked again as he slowly walked over to the apparent Leiko, who huffed in response to his question. "Come on," she said, "I don't look that different." The solar god begged to differ, but only one person called him Ise-itoko, and that person was Leiko. At least he could be sure that it was indeed his adoptive cousin. "What happened to you, Leiko-san? What happened to your hair and your eyes?" Leiko smiled as she crossed her arms, enjoying the look of confusion on her younger cousin's face. "I've decided to go for a new look, Ise-itoko. I cut my hair and got some contacts." "Contacts?" "They're thin lenses placed directly on the surface of the eye." "So you didn't change your eye color?" "No, but as long as I have the contacts on, it just looks like I have green eyes." "What about your hair? Would you cut it?" Brushing her new short hair away from her eyes, Leiko sent Issei another smile. "My Ise-itoko has much to learn, doesn't he?" she teased slightly. Issei only blinked in response, prompting Leiko's smile to widen. "I thought about everything that has happened lately, Issei. The contact with the supernatural, finding out that your cousin is a Super Saiyan, meeting the Shinigami and God herself, and gaining 2 dragons as cousin-in-laws, is a lot for me to take in." She noticed her cousin's confused expression at the Super Saiyan remark, and she prevented herself from laughing by continuing her words. "Now that everything's peaceful again, I decided it was time for me to change my style a little. You know, to start anew. And that's why you cut some of your hair?" "That's right. The hair is a part of my body, Ise-itoko. So when I cut my hair, it meant that I chose to live a new life. It's my choice. So it's a sign of maturity?" "Exactly." "Oh." The elder Hyoudou's facial expression suddenly morphed into a look that exuded slight coyness. She held her arms and placed them behind herself, biting her lip, seemingly in a fit of shyness. "So what do you think, Ise-itoko? Does it look okay?" she asked. Issei placed his hands in his pockets, his eyes locked onto his cousin. With a tilt of his head, Issei offered Leiko a nod. "It's a little strange, Leiko-san. I'm used to seeing you with longer hair." The shy look on Leiko's face noticeably dissipated in response to Issei's answer. Before she could open her mouth to respond, Issei continued his words. "It's pretty though," he amended with a smile, "a little weird, but a good weird." Leiko went to open her mouth and then paused as she closed it immediately. Issei's last sentence caused her mind to stop momentarily. Although the statement was innocent at best, at least she hoped it was innocent, it brought a strange wave of lightheadedness over her. Issei's smile disappeared as he noticed something strange happening to his older cousin. "Leiko-san? Are you alright? Your face is glowing like a tomato." In response to Issei's concern, Leiko finally caught her momentary lapse in silence and touched her face. Her forest green eyes widened as she felt the heated touch of her face and removed her hand away immediately. With an eyebrow raised, Issei lifted his hand up and placed it on Leiko's forehead, oblivious to the latter's quiet squeak of surprise. Issei hummed, "So this is what Red was talking about." At the mention of the Apocalypse Dragon, Leiko's surprised expression morphed into her normal look of annoyance. Trying to ignore Issei's touch, Leiko let out a scoff. "What did he say this time?" "He said that whenever your face turns red you're either angry or delving into your cousin's complex tendencies, or whatever he was talking about." Leiko's eyes widened in a comical fashion, and with a scowling pout, she clenched her fists. "How many times do I have to say it? I do not have a cousin complex," she screamed. The crowd of citizens that stood near the cinema started to quiet their voices down at the sound of Leiko's declaration. Taking a few deep breaths, Leiko looked around her surroundings and noticed that all eyes were on her shaking frame. Widening her eyes, Leiko's jaw fell open, unable to believe what she had just done. Very reluctantly, her forest green eyes traveled over to her Ise-itoko, who stared at her with surprised brown eyes. "I didn't say you had a cousin complex, Leiko-san," he said with a confused tone. "I don't even know what that is." Leiko felt her face heat up completely, her appearance resembling a tomato in clothing. She found enough willpower to lift her hand up and close her mouth, her blush not even close to leaving her face. Blinking several times, Issei finally removed his hand from Leiko's forehead and placed his arms to his side. Leiko resisted the urge to sigh in tiredness, cursing the Apocalypse Dragon to oblivion, just knowing that the jackass was probably laughing his ass off in the dimensional gap. Dimensional gap. DFFT. Ha 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 ha. Oh man, that shit is priceless. Back at the cinema. It was now 11:55, with only 5 minutes remaining until midnight showing. The citizens in front of the cinema had fortunately resolved to forget about the 24-year-old woman who was clearly in denial about her cousin complex. Leiko, her face still red, was fuming inside, planning to somehow successfully get back at the Great Red. What could she do? She could wreck his motorcycle. But then he would just create another one. Screw it. She would just get Ophis to beat him up. It was better than nothing. Hey, Leiko-san. Leiko turned to look at her younger cousin, who was looking at her with a combination of concern and hesitance. You okay? The elder Hyoudou went ready to open her mouth until she closed it immediately. With a deep sigh, she offered Issei a soft smile. I'm fine, Ise-itoko. I guess I got a little carried away. Haha. Leiko said as she chuckled a little. Issei blinked and nodded his head, seemingly satisfied with Leiko's answer. Looking at his watch, the solar god perked up a little. Movie's about to start. We should get going. Leiko hummed, yeah, we should. As he and Leiko followed the crowd into the cinema, Issei turned to look at his cousin in curiosity. By the way, Leiko-san, Issei began, what movie are we seeing anyway? Drag Soul Evolution. She answered. Issei stopped in his pace as he adopted a hesitant expression. We're watching that. Leiko stopped to look at her cousin, and she tilted her head. Yeah. Why? Do you not want to see it? It's just that the guy who lives in the apartment above me told me about this movie. Morisawa, I think his name was. What did he say? He called the movie an irredeemable abomination. Leiko blinked at Morisawa's apparent choice of words. That's a little harsh, don't you think? Issei only shrugged in response, prompting Leiko to roll her eyes and grab hold of her cousin's arm. With a bout of reluctant eagerness, Leiko dragged her cousin into the cinema. 84 minutes later. Citizens stormed out of the cinema, cursing out storms towards the movie. Following them were a rather traumatized and wide-eyed Issei and an enraged Leiko. Shaking himself out of his weary state, Issei cautiously looked over to his cousin, noticing that she was trying to hold in her curses. He also noticed that Leiko's face was sporting that tomato red color and absolutely knew that his cousin's face wasn't red because she was blushing. Leiko-san. Drag Soul Evolution ha. Evolution my ass. More like Drag Soul Evolution. Issei closed his mouth shut, having the strange feeling that he was going to be subjected to a long rant. Oh well. At least he got to spend some time with his cousin. I wonder what Ophis-chan is doing. I hope she's doing alright at the house. I gotta remember to get some sweets for her. Issei's penthouse apartment. Uno out. You did not say Uno when you placed your second to last card on the table. Ophis glared at her opponent with a cute pout and she placed her card on her lap. Her opponent stared at her with her emotionless green eyes. You did not say Uno in our previous match either. That is correct. However, the rules do not apply to me. Why is that? Ophis asked, not really wanting to know the answer. The above entity tilted her head as she maintained her gaze on the Ouroboros dragon. Sitting inanimate near her was a plush version of Issei Hyoudou. Ophis noticeably bristled at the plush version of her mate but held her tongue, knowing that the real Issei was hers. Because I am God. So? As some mortals would say in this world, the above entity began, her voice gaining a tone of emotion. Screw the rules, I am God. The first thing I hated about the movie was how Satoru Saramago just suddenly crashed onto the earth in such a stupid way. Well, I mean, Issei hesitated in his words, I was sent to earth as well, Leiko-san. Yeah, but at least you didn't crash into earth via meteor, Ise-itoko. Amaterasu sending you to the Grand Ice Shrine was much more appropriate. In the original Drag Soul manga, Satoru was sent to earth in a spacecraft. Then there was the stupid mistake of making Satoru a high school student when in the original manga, he didn't know a damn thing about education. But I'm a high school student too. Issei said. That's right, Leiko replied, but in the manga, Satoru never had a proper education. He may have not been good in social skills, but he knew how to fight, just like you, Ise-itoko. And. Leiko-san. Are you okay? Of course I am, Ise-itoko. What makes you think I'm not? You're shaking the table. Leiko mimicked the position of Issei's lowered head and looked down to see her hands gripping the table. Her grip was apparently strong, as the table was indeed shaking. Sporting a slight embarrassed look on her face, Leiko released her strong hold and placed her hands on her lap. In an effort to calm Leiko down, Issei decided for the two of them to have a midnight snack at the nearest bakery. Besides, he was planning on bringing back Ophis some sweets like he had promised to, so the bakery was a good choice. Leiko's hands continued to fidget about as she narrowed her eyes. Issei glanced at his cousin in slight concern, genuinely puzzled at Leiko's reaction to the movie. Sure, the solar god would admit that he tended to get angry whenever anyone tried to harm his family or deliberately wrong him. But it was just a movie. Unless. Did Leiko think that the Drag Soul Evolution movie had wronged her or something? And that the wrong that was inflicted onto her was the waste of 84 minutes of her life that she would never get back? Issei didn't know if he could even consider that a wrongful offense. Of course he wasn't going to say that to Leiko, lest he want to make his cousin angry again. He would just have to find out how to calm the temperamental Leiko. "Leiko-san?" he asked. Leiko's eyes widened as she locked her orbs of sight with her cousin. "Huh? Do you want to talk about it? Talk about what you didn't like or barely tolerate about the movie?" If he could convince Leiko to vent the rest of her frustrations about the movie, perhaps that could be the solution to calm her down. After all, he was in no way oblivious to his cousin's anger. As Leiko lowered her eyes, she shook her head slowly, her facial expression softening. No. I'm fine, Ise-itoko. Maybe I shouldn't have overreacted like that. After all, it's just a movie." Holding her hands together, Leiko locked eyes with her cousin and took a deep breath. She looked around the bakery, spotting the numerous pastries and sweets. As she went to speak, she looked up just in time to see Issei place his hand on her forehead. Immediately, she felt her face heat up. With his hand on his cousin's headache, Issei closed his eyes, his face set into an expression of concentration. Leiko stared at her younger cousin with her eyes wide, her heart beating rapidly. The faint blush on her face had completely evolved into a full crimson glow. "Ise-itoko?" Leiko's eyes widened further as she suddenly felt a wave of heat leave her body, the red color leaving her face. Opening his eyes, Issei removed his hand away from his cousin's forehead and leaned back into his seat, noticing Leiko's surprised look. "Ise-itoko, what did you?" With a soft look, Issei placed his arms on the table. "Your face was turning red, Leiko-san. I could literally feel the heat emitting off from your body. I didn't want you to blow a gasket or whatever the phrase is called." Leiko maintained her wide-eyed stare as she gulped down a nervous lump in her throat. Attempting to compose herself, Leiko looked over to the pastry section to see the female cashier conversing with a customer. "Issei?" He replied. "Could you buy me some sweets from that woman near the counter? I'm a little hungry." "Sure," Issei said as he nodded. Issei got up from his seat and went to purchase Leiko's request, leaving the elder Hyoudou to sit by herself. Sighing, Leiko brushed a strand of her short brown hair out of her eyes. "Wow. Look at him. I know, right? He's so handsome." Leiko blinked several times as she turned around to see two identical young women with their eyes set on Issei. She noticed that the twins were giggling cheerfully, their suggestive glances towards her Ise-itoko a little off-putting. Against her better judgment, Leiko went ready to open her mouth to tell them to politely back off until one of the girls spoke to her. "Hey. You know him, right?" Leiko paused in her words, trying to word out a reply in the most possible non-rudimentary way. "And if I do?" "Well, it's just that we saw him sitting in front of you." The other girl replied, "We're in the same class as him at Kuo Academy. He always sits in the back of the class and keeps to himself. It's kind of weird, but he doesn't seem that bad. He's really cute though." "Oh, they were so dead. Do you think he's cute?" Leiko asked in a suspicious tone, not entirely disagreeing with the second girl. Something wasn't sitting right with her. She couldn't tell if it was her overprotective nature or… Well, I was thinking of asking him out the next morning at school. Okay. Now that was the straw that broke the camel's back. "Why do you get to ask him out?" the first girl asked indignantly. "I sit right in front of him at school." "That doesn't mean anything," the second twin countered. Taking a deep breath, Leiko closed her eyes and turned her body to face the argumentative twins. She would have to take care of this in a mature fashion. "What makes you think he doesn't have a girlfriend?" she asked. The twins stopped their bickering and turned to look at a deceptively calm Leiko. The elder Hyoudou narrowed her eyes as she crossed her arms. "What?" the first twin asked. "Do you know who his girlfriend is?" "As a matter of fact, I do," Leiko replied, "and let me tell you girls something." The twins shared confused glances as Leiko's expression seemed to darken slightly. "He is off limits. Do you understand?" The second twin raised an eyebrow and glared at Leiko. "Who are you to tell us that he's off limits? You're not his mother." "No, but I'm the one who's going to make sure you don't take him away from me," she thought darkly before she cleared her head. "I'm aware that I'm not his mother. But I know him better than he knows himself. I've also known him more than you ever will." "How do we know you're not lying?" the first twin challenged. "Because he's my cousin." The twins widened their eyes slightly as they scooted away from Leiko. "He's my cousin," Leiko repeated, "my little cousin. My Itoko-chan. Like I said not too long ago, I know my Itoko-chan better than he knows himself. I know how he acts, thinks, and feels." The girls' eyes widened further as they scooted away again. The twins were starting to grow wary of the temperamental girl. "Hey, we're sorry," the second twin offered, "we didn't know he was your cousin." Leiko was about to say more until suddenly she felt the heat leave her face. Widening her eyes, she looked up to see Issei with his hand on top of her head. The solar god gazed at his older cousin with concerned hesitance, his other hand occupied by the 3 bags of donuts and sweets. Her face sporting a blush, Leiko looked over to the side to see 2 empty seats. She widened her eyes further as the door to the bakery closed immediately, leaving a slight gust of wind. "Leiko-san, what's the matter? Your face is all red again." Within her mind, bouts of emotions were rushing through Leiko's thoughts. She had almost lost her temper with the twins as soon as the first one contemplated dating her Ise-itoko. Of course there was the obvious factor of Ophis' claim of Issei as her mate. But still. Issei was her Itoko-chan. Leiko exhaled deeply and released a prolonged breath, closing her eyes to calm herself. She had to keep her temper in check. She hadn't gotten this angry since the first time Great Red accused her of harboring a cousin complex. Now those twins had the audacity to. Leiko shook her head to clear her thoughts. She was overreacting again, and she couldn't let that side of herself reveal itself the longer she was in front of her cousin. Rubbing her forehead in an attempt to soothe her ever-growing headache, Leiko forced a small smile on her face and got up from her seat. She gently grabbed her bag from her cousin's hand and widened her smile towards Issei. "I'm okay, Ise-itoko." Outside of the bakery. Leiko and Issei walked out of the bakery, leaving before the store's closing time. As she walked in front of her cousin, Leiko widened her eyes as she spotted the twins sitting next to each other on a nearby bench. She stopped in her pace as a hesitant expression crossed her face, numerous thoughts flowing through her mind. One of the twins looked up and she immediately went to warn her sister until Leiko spoke up. "Hold on." The girls stared cautiously up at Leiko, with one of them sending a glance towards Issei, who looked at them curiously. Sighing in what almost seemed like regret, Leiko locked eyes with the twins. "I want to apologize for how I acted back there in the bakery." She began, "I'm just a little protective of my cousin because he doesn't have good social skills." She wasn't technically lying. Issei sometimes had trouble interacting with other people. Well, other people that didn't include herself, Ophis, Great Red, and the rest of the supernatural entities. Okay, he had trouble interacting with normal people, but that was beside the point. One of the women adopted a surprised expression as she looked over at Issei, who had set his confused gaze to his older cousin. The second twin's eyes were locked onto Leiko's. "It's okay." She replied with a genuine smile, "I think it's nice that you're looking after your cousin." Leiko sent a soft smile to the second twin and nodded to her with a thankful gaze. The first twin removed her gaze from Issei and looked over to Leiko, sending her a slight nod. "Thank you so much for understanding," Leiko said with a grateful tone of voice, "and again, I'm sorry for my behavior back there." "It's alright," the second twin said as her smile widened. Nodding to the twins, Leiko looked over to Issei and reached for his arm. She walked away from the twins, her mood brightening with each step. "Leiko-san? What was that all about?" Unable to suppress her smile, Leiko turned to look at her cousin. "Nothing, Ise-itoko. It's just another example of starting anew." "Wow. It's almost 3 a.m. Issei mused as he looked at his watch. "I better get these sweets to Ophis before she goes to sleep." Leiko smiled as she shook her head in response. She looked up to see that she and her younger cousin were almost at the latter's house. The elder Hyoudou stood in front of Issei as she placed her hands in her pockets. Issei stopped in his pace and smiled at Leiko softly. "Well, in spite of the movie, I had a great time, Leiko-san. It's rare that we get to spend some time together without anything happening." Leiko hummed gently as her smile widened. "I had an excellent time too, Ise-itoko." Placing his hands in his pockets, Issei tilted his head slightly. "Do you want me to walk you or just teleport you home, Leiko-san? It's still a little dark out here." As soon as Issei offered his suggestion, a faint crimson blush appeared on Leiko's face. Fortunately for her, Issei had turned his attention to his watch the moment he finished his sentence. Leiko shook her head and cleared her throat, attempting to voice out her thoughts. Actually, Ise-itoko," Leiko began with a nervous tone of voice. "Could I actually spend the rest of the night here?" Issei looked up and gave his older cousin a questioning expression. "Do you want to sleep over here?" he asked. "Is there something wrong at your house?" "Oh no. It's just that," Leiko began before her words trailed off. What could she say? She didn't really have a reason for wanting to stay over at her cousin's house for the rest of the night. She could say that the walk home would be a bit tiresome. But then Issei would just opt to teleport her there. Leiko searched through her thoughts in an attempt to think of an answer. Widening her eyes, Leiko mentally slapped herself as she realized that she still had another dilemma. Ophis. Trying to convince Ophis to do anything for someone else was as successful as trying to escape from Great Red after staring at him for too long. Leiko had already annoyed the Ouroboros dragon when the latter bluntly revealed that she had interrupted her spooning with Issei. Boy, was she glad that she was talking to Ophis on the phone at the time. At least that way Ophis wouldn't have seen her blush. But Leiko knew that Ophis didn't hate her. After all, she and Ophis were one of the few people who genuinely understood and knew Issei. They both knew how he acted, how he thought, and how he viewed the world. Although she would never admit it to the infinite dragon god, Leiko felt that she knew her Ise-itoko far longer than she had. Then again, the dragon god was still living in the dimensional gap at the time, so Leiko couldn't really count that. Leiko-san. Leiko flinched as she was suddenly pulled out of her thoughts. She blinked several times and looked up to see Issei with his hand on the front door. The solar god looked at his older cousin curiously. "You can stay for the night if you want," Issei said with a shrug, "just let me talk to Ophis and hear what she says." Leiko blinked again as she slowly nodded and followed her cousin into the apartment. The walk to Issei's door was quiet, as some of the people were no doubt in their beds. As they walked up to the last hallway, the door at the end opened, revealing a man with short messy black hair and glasses. He rubbed his eyes tiredly and looked to see Issei and a young woman in her 20s with short brown frizzy hair and forest green eyes. As Issei went to insert his key in his door, the man made his presence known. "Issei Hyoudou?" At the call of his name, Issei looked over to see the man and nodded to him in recognition. "Murasawa. What's up?" he greeted me. Murasawa sent his sights over to Leiko, who raised an eyebrow in response to his stare. "Did you see that abomination I warned you about?" "How did you know?" Issei asked in surprise. "I can literally feel the surge of righteous hatred flowing off from her," he replied, alluding to Leiko. Issei spotted Leiko's expression immediately darkening, and he prevented her forthcoming rant by teleporting into his house instead of opening the door. Blinking several times, Murasawa shrugged and went to walk to his door. Seconds later, he sprinted out again and widened his eyes as he did a double take, staring at the former spot where Issei and the young woman stood. Did he just do instant transmission? Inside of Issei's penthouse apartment. "Sorry about that, Leiko-san. But I didn't want you and Murasawa to get into a debate." "It's alright, Ise-itoko." Leiko gently brushed off her cousin's apology. "Issei. You're back." Leiko and Issei turned their attention to the Ouroboros dragon, who was lying sideways on the couch. Her dark gray eyes were flat and narrowed, exuding an annoyed yet relieved aura. Issei smiled as he walked over to his wife and sat down next to her. The solar god resisted the urge to laugh at the infinite dragon god's pout and gently rubbed Orphis's hair, prompting the dragon's expression to soften slightly. His smile widening at Orphis's look, Issei bent down to place a kiss on her cheek. "Sorry we got back a little late, Ophis. We went to the bakery after the movie ended." Ophis blinked as she spotted the bag of sweets in her mate's hand. Her half-glare immediately dissipated as her stomach growled. Leiko widened her eyes at the growling sound and she kept her mouth shut as she looked around the penthouse apartment. "I forgive you, my Issei," Ophis said, her monotone voice never changing. Ophis took the bag away from her mate and sat up on the couch. As she reached into the bag, the Ouroboros dragon sent her attention over to the quiet Leiko. She tilted her head slightly to the left, her narrowed eyes lifting up. She gave Leiko a strange look, which did not go unnoticed by the human. "Cousin Leiko?" Leiko smiled as she waved to the dragon god. "Hi, Ophis." Ophis started almost intently at the elder Hyoudou, her eyes softening. "I did not recognize you immediately. You have changed your outward appearance. Your hair is short and your eyes are no longer crimson." Leiko's smile turned into one of amusement as she mentally shook her head. Her Ise-itoko didn't recognize her either, so she wouldn't give Ophis a hard time about it. After a few more seconds of staring at her mate's cousin, Ophis resumed her searching for the first sign of a donut. "Cousin Leiko. How was the midnight movie?" Issei immediately locked eyes with his cousin, hoping that she wouldn't go on another rant. Much to his surprise, Leiko merely gave Ophis a small shrug. "It wasn't that good, Ophis." Ophis tilted her head again and went back to eating her food. As Issei gave Leiko a side glance, he cleared his throat and folded his hands. "Ophis," he began, "would it be alright if Leiko could stay the night over?" Ophis gulped down the donut, her mouth full of the chewy and doughy fluffiness. The Ouroboros dragon looked over to her mate's cousin. Leiko didn't know why, but the temperature of the area surrounding her seemed to be getting a bit lower. Her younger cousin's wife wasn't even giving her a chilling glare or her usual blank stare. Orphis's gaze was bordering on a combination of thoughtfulness with a sense of calculated aloofness. Leiko noticed the dragon god's pointed ears twitching just slightly, and just for a moment, she had the feeling that she was being judged. "Cousin Leiko can stay here," Ophis finally answered while lifting only a finger up, on one condition. Leiko widened her eyes at Orphis's answer. She wasn't expecting the Ouroboros dragon to say yes that quickly. Maybe she had been wrong to be a little hesitant around Ophis. After all, if she was affiliated with her Ise-itoko, then she was already considered family in her eyes. "What's the condition?" she asked. It couldn't be that bad if it was Ophis initiating the condition. When my Issei and I awakened, Ophis began before pointing to Leiko, "You shall be the one to cook breakfast for us." Okay, she could do that. Holding back a cheerful squeal, because squealing about the notion of spending time with her younger cousin was so beneath her, Leiko nodded with a smile. "Sure. I can manage that." Sending Leiko a nod, Ophis got up from her seat on the couch and ate another donut. She then walked towards her shared bedroom with Issei, leaving the solar god and Leiko in the living room. Issei crossed his arms as he looked towards Leiko and smiled at her. "Well, that's that. I guess I'll go ahead set up the couch and we should be able to go to sleep." "Wait a minute, Ise-itoko," Leiko interrupted. Issei blinked as he noticed the hesitant look on Leiko's face. "What is it, Leiko-san?" Leiko gulped down a nervous lump in her throat as she twiddled her index fingers. She had already risked it by asking Ophis to stay over the night. That was her initial intention. But there was something else she wanted to do. She may have been pushing it a little, but the rush of her complex urges were beginning to accumulate in her thoughts. "Could I sleep in the same bed as you and Ophis?" Issei blinked at Leiko's question. Where did that question come from? He opened his mouth to speak until his wife made her presence known by suddenly teleporting in front of the elder Hyoudou. Leiko widened her eyes and backed away a few steps. Orphis's intent gaze didn't seem to be threatening, but it was still a little chilling. Ophis slowly tilted her head. "You wish to sleep next to my Issei and I, cousin Leiko. What is your reason for wanting to do this?" The elder Hyoudou felt her body stiffen, her confidence slowly fading. Why oh why did she have to delve into her damn complex urges now? Thanks for watching this video. Part 1 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.